This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Canna Health.
Hey cannabis consumers, have you ever consumed a cannabis product thinking it'll make you feel a certain way, but then it doesn't? Don't you wish you had a clear understanding of your own DNA so that you could make informed decisions about what type of cannabis products interact best with your system? Well, now you can with EndoDNA. EndoDNA is a simple DNA test that maps your entire endocannabinoid system and then matches that summary with a specific cannabinoid ratio and terpene profile that best aligns with your unique genotype. Imagine being armed with personal information when visiting a dispensary. You'll have the knowledge and power and capability to purchase products that best align with your genotype. Visit their website to purchase the EndoDNA Collection Kit and Endo Decoded Report at endodna.com/products and use the promo code CONNECT15 for a 20% discount. Again, that's endodna.com/products and use the promo code CONNECT15 for a 20% discount. The future of cannabinoid therapeutics is here with EndoDNA. Hello, Morgan.
Hi, Kevin. How are you?
I am doing well. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you.
Yes, excited to be talking to you today, and I know that the audience is as well. Before we dive into your firm, which is Davis Legal, I want to talk to you. I know that you're a co-owner of is it a med spa startup?
Yep, that's right.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about that. Where does that passion come from, and then we'll kind of tie it into to what you're doing with Davis Legal.
Yeah, so it's funny, my passion for cannabis and my passion for wellness, which led to the med spa sort of iteration of my wellness path, happened kind of at the same time. I started out my legal career in criminal defense, so in court all the time, loved litigating, loved the fight, and then shifted and fell in love with cannabis and the industry, and it actually has quite a lot of parallels with the criminal industry in how people view it and the hurdles you have to jump through and the sort of stigma attached to it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I was personally going through kind of a personal wellness revolution is what I call it, where I just had gotten to a point in my life where I was experiencing really high anxiety on a daily basis and was trying some alternative methods to help treat myself. And so all three of these things are happening at the same time. And so I shifted my legal practice into just focusing on cannabis.
Which is a much needed service, right? I mean, it being so highly regulated.
Yes, highly regulated, but at the same time, not regulated in the ways that we need it to be to actually allow people to operate without so much weight around their necks, right?
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. And especially within the hemp side of things, right? And the hemp industry, it seems like there is a lack thereof regulation. So it's almost, making it the wild, wild west in a way where it's really difficult for these operators to, effectively operate in the space.
Yeah, I mean, in every facet of running a business that's quote unquote legal. So whether you're in industrial hemp, or you're niching down into a specific cannabinoid like CBD or CBN or whatever it may be, you're operating in a space that isn't nearly as highly regulated as if you go to Colorado. I mean, the regulations to own a dispensary to sell a marijuana product are this thick, right?
And California is like double that, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. I really give it to anybody who operates in California. I'm like, man, y'all gotta love this plant.
I had the founder of her name was Christina DePaci, founder of Paradiso, and she was telling me that as a business owner, a cannabis farm, there's and they're vertically integrated, so they have there's 9 different licenses, a license for every little thing that they do. It's just it's insane.
Yeah, and you have to reapply for each of them almost yearly. And then you've got to deal with like California's makeup of their county regulations is enough to make your head explode because each county has its own additional regulations. Yeah, so I really give it up to the pioneers in California. They're doing God's work.
They're doing the God's work, and it just reinforces that they're the OGs because
Yeah.
they're still surviving and thriving really in those conditions, in that environment. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think they also are the cautionary tale of what happens when you let too much regulation take over.
Right.
I think Canada is the same cautionary tale. Like, Health Canada did a really great thing in legalizing everything at once, but they forgot to, they legalized growing it and creating it, but then they forgot, the sales point. And so there was all this product sitting with nowhere to go for years, and all these people out of money being like, we need to move this product in order to make it all worth it. So they're great cautionary tales to help the rest of us as we develop our own programs.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, from your purview, being the CEO at Davis Legal and working with your clients, I mean, do you specialize in one state? Are you across the country? And then next question is like, are you seeing that there is kind of state adoption of other regulations that have put in place by other states? Like, is there a learning kind of curve that's going on here?
Yeah, so I'm licensed in North Carolina, and the way that law licenses work, you can only practice law and give legal advice inside your state. But I work with a trade association, the CBD Association, which I'm the industry liaison for, and I work with a company that I helped found with a group of other people that offers services to the cannabis industry across the United States. In that we have a regulatory database of all the laws on both the marijuana and hemp side. And we have some consulting services that we offer there. So that allows me to use my expertise outside of the state of North Carolina, in a limited capacity. But I think these days, in order for you to properly advise a client in the legal space, you have to have knowledge of comparative states, because so much of this is like looking at places like California, Colorado, Oregon, New York, who are coming online or who are developing their regulations, to be able to tell your client, this is what I think it's going to look like. This is what it might be. This is what we should prepare for. Because
so you have a crystal ball. I mean,
exactly. Yeah, the only way you can prepare is to have a vast knowledge of what everybody else is doing.
And I mean, you're on the front lines. I mean, you're dealing with these legalities firsthand, right? So it only makes sense that that's the best we can do at this point, is kind of try to predict what's going to happen and then adapt if it doesn't, right? Like,
yeah,
always trying to stay ahead of it. And speaking of that, that's a good segue, because I want to talk to you about, this industry is just moving at a lightning pace, right? And there's a lot of different trends happening, consumer trends around cannabis consumption. So as those new trends emerge, what are some of the legal hurdles that you face, and how quickly do you need to pivot as things are changing?
So from lawyers are risk managers, right? Like we want to mitigate your risk. So we're the ones who like to come along and sort of rain on your parade a lot and be like, okay, these are all the potholes. These are all the problems you need to know about. But I also understand that, especially in an industry like this, you need to be able to pivot quickly, and your risk tolerance has to be high. It is to begin with, because otherwise, why would you be in it?
Right.
And so balancing that for my clients is one of the things that I've really had to get good at, is balancing my like doom and gloom. You understand that these are the possible pitfalls, while at the same time saying, but I get what you're trying to do, and let's figure out how we get from no to yes, or how we at least get me to maybe. And yeah, I think you need to be really ready to pivot at any point. At the same time, there are lots of things that I tell any of my clients. If you have good intentions and you're thinking about your strategies and you're thinking about putting in safeguards and making an effort to be in compliance when there are regulations to be in compliance with, you're going to more often than not end up on the right side of things.
That makes sense.
That, but more often than not, you're going to end up on the right side of things.
Yeah.
And I mean, look at like Curaleaf. So Curaleaf, huge, world's largest cannabis company, great cannabis company. They straddle both sides of the line with THC and CBD. They've got 7 lawsuits pending against them right now for a product that was created out of human error. Something either got mislabeled or was a defective product. Super common. And they've been upfront and honest about it, and they've complied with regulators in Oregon throughout the process. And they might get dinged in the end, and they might have to pay a fine, or they might have to settle a lawsuit. But the chances are they're still going to come out on top because they're doing everything that they're supposed to do.
Right. And transparency, like you mentioned, like being open and upfront. And I would imagine that like taking record of everything and having SOPs in place and lawyers that can document, like, of course, I mean, they're an established, of course, MSO, but that's even important for just even startups or small to medium sized businesses as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you want to give yourself peace of mind, then when you put together your business plan, when you put together your procedures, I know it seems like a tough cost to swallow in the beginning, but peace of mind is priceless. If you can sit down and have someone say, I think these are good things you're doing, this is areas of improvement, and this is what I would have you do to protect yourself, you're going to walk out of a meeting like that feeling like you're prepared for the next year, 2-3 years of growth in your business.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that brings up a good topic, because if there might be some people listening that are like, hey, my state is coming online within the next year in 2022, right? Or there's a bill that's up for a vote to legalize. So, what would your kind of guide or advice be for brand formation? What should business owners plan for when wanting to start a legal cannabis business?
Sure. So I think it also, again, it depends on what side of cannabis we're talking about. Are we talking about above 0.3% or below 0.3%?
Let's take it with both. Let's start with the cannabis industry above, and then we'll move to hemp and the CBD products.
So the great thing about above is that most of those regulatory schemes that are coming out, when they come online, are either doing like what Virginia is doing right now. So Virginia just legalized it, but their retail side won't be ready for another 2 years. So anybody who wants to be in that business, knows that they want to be in that business for the next 2 years, has 2 years to watch and actually engage in that process along the way and know what to anticipate. Or they're coming out with a fully regulated, or close to a fully regulated system like New York or New Jersey. They're still in the process of developing, but most of their regulations for dispensaries are up and running. That's the great thing about above 0.3% is that they normally come out with their rules ready to go, or they allow enough of a runway to give you an opportunity to be part of the process.
Right.
But when you're talking about branding and trademarking in cannabis in general, it's tough because the Patent and Trademark Office isn't recognizing, because above 0.3 isn't federally legal, you can't get a federal trademark or patent. And they're pretty skeptical still of even below 0.3%. So you want to work with a trademark attorney who knows how to do those applications, who's been through that process and can point out where the pitfalls are to you. Because otherwise, the chances are your application is going to get rejected once, maybe twice, maybe more than that before you can get through the process.
Man, I didn't even think about that, because So like for instance, I dabbled into on the CBD hemp side of things. And like last year I had an online store where I was
Mhm.
just drop shipping products. So not having my own, but like of course the first thing my business partner and I stumbled upon was like challenges with banking, of course, right? And like
Yeah, yeah.
so, and then it didn't help that the name of our business had cannabinoid in it, right? So that was like an automatic rejection with the banks, right? So I didn't think about like you said, like patents and trademarks and things like that any business that's growing would need to do, right, to protect themselves. Like they face those same challenges, of course, that they would face with banking, but also on the patent and copyright and trademark side because of the federal illegality. That's crazy.
Yep. So that's a, a hurdle to come over, or when you're trying to come up with something, especially in a developing market. Like, you spend a lot of time and effort developing a great logo and a great product, and your website and your marketing, and you don't want anybody ripping you off. But
Right.
at the moment, there aren't a lot of protections available for above 0.3% yet, and below 0.3% is still pretty hard to get. But I think you bring up a great point, which is structure. So, like, structure from the beginning. How do I name my company so that I can get a bank account and also operate without having to lie or hide?
Yeah.
And the good thing is more and more banks, especially at the local state level, are becoming friendlier. Chase, which is a national bank, is actually quite friendly to below 0.3% companies now. But so it's a lot about personal relationships with your local banker, and maybe your local small bank. And it's about, maybe you form your company in a name that's not so obvious, and then you do a DBA.
Yeah, in hindsight, that didn't help me at all. Yeah, that's
Or you have a name that, the name of the company never changes to anything that has to do with cannabis, but all your products are CBD or cannabinoid related.
yeah, because you can always do a DBA, right? Like you can name a product different than what the umbrella holdings kind of corporation is, or the business name.
Yeah, exactly. And a DBA isn't even a separate entity. It just basically says, like, my legal entity is this, and my forward facing self to the public is this. You don't have to have two separate legal entities. That's another thing you can consider, though, is having a holdings company with a separate company underneath it, which some people do if, let's say, you're a company that wants to be vertically integrated. So you want to hold your IP, your intellectual property, your
Mm-hmm.
branding, those assets under one entity. You want to hold your real estate investments under another entity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, so that you limit your liability between what might get sued and what you might have to move around.
That's really smart. That makes a lot of sense, so that they're not coming at everything at once. You've kind of got different piles of assets.
Yep. Yep.
Very, very nice. Okay, so we're getting some good legal advice already from Miss Davis over here. So Morgan, I want to talk to you about, since we're on the topic, say the brand is you've formed the business, it's registered, you're up and running. What are, or not even up and running yet? Let's talk about some of the other legal challenges that cannabis entrepreneurs will face, and outside of hiring someone like yourself, like, are there any just kind of basic resources that they can look to if they're just bootstrapping at the beginning?
Sure. I think that there are, this industry, one of the things that I love about the cannabis industry is that everybody wants to help everybody. There's certain areas that are competitive, but I think the general community wants to figure it out together. And so I would say, your trade associations, check in there. A lot of them have great educational materials. I believe in the trade shows that the cannabis industry holds. I think that is a great way to spend some cash and get, 4 days of an intense amount of information available to you.
And
Podcasts.
the networking, also the networking opportunity is great.
Yep. The networking is incredible. Podcasts like yours. I mean, this is where we're getting our information now, is targeted newsletters and, roundups and podcasts. And I think those are some of the best tools you can use if you can't afford to go out and hire, a strategic business development person or an attorney or whatever it may be. But then there are also tools coming online that are targeted specifically for the cannabis industry. There are, marketing specialists who can help you with your social media channels and can do a review of what you got. For some of them can be quite expensive, but some of them are pretty reasonable to help you come up with ideas of how you're going to get around getting kicked off Instagram, getting kicked off Facebook randomly, how you're going to deal with when Square kicks back a couple of your transactions because they look like cannabis transactions. All of those things are now becoming available. And then your peers are always a great way to figure out how to bootstrap something, is go sit down and talk to somebody who's been doing it for a year or more. And pick their brain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, all that makes sense, and that's definitely something that these business owners starting out should consider. I do want to share my screen, and I apologize for those that are not watching the episode, but we did get a question come in from Twitter.
Sure.
Dr. Daniela, she's on Twitter at Cannabis. She has two questions. She said regarding cannabinoids. First one's easy, still thinking how to word the second one. So first one, what laws and regulations will come in place with other psychoactive cannabinoids, for instance, Delta 8, THCV, THCP, and how will hemp be legally, quotes, defined regarding these other cannabinoids?
Oh, I love this question. So, one of my favorite questions I get is, if you could have any law pass, what would it be? And some people say Safe Banking Act, and some people say a federal legalization. Go back and rewrite all the definitions that exist when it comes to THC and cannabis. I think they're really confusing for everybody.
Right. Well, and especially the way the Schedule 1 definition, right? I mean, cannabis does not fit that description at all. Highly addictive, does not have any medicinal value. I mean, hello, there's medical states, right?
Oh man, I mean, the Schedule 1 designation, like, it gets me so hot under the collar. I get really angry talking about the history of how we ended up there and how wrong it is, and how totally inaccurate it is now. That being said, so
that's a whole other episode.
Yeah, I can go on. What makes it even more difficult is these definitions don't make it easy to start incorporating things like Delta 8, THCP, THCV, THCA, CBN, CBG, because we've siloed it so much to Delta 9 for so long. And because there's such a lack of education and understanding by the legislators who are developing the statutes, it makes it really difficult. Now, there's a pro to that, which is right now the total gray area around the definition and understanding of what Delta 8 is allowing it to take off and skyrocket as everybody's favorite cannabinoid right now. And I think as long as we exist in a space with unclear definitions, every cannabinoid that comes online is going to have the potential to have its heyday moment of skyrocketing to the front and be like, I'm the new favorite. Well, before it gets regulated.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, I'll tell you what I hear here in Texas, which is a highly, prohibitive state with cannabis. And is that people love Delta 8 because it's available to them legally. And and or for now anyways, and it gets them high. It has the psychoactive properties that Delta 9
Right.
has. So
Right.
in my view, I just see this appetite for people that just want the psychoactive properties that THC Delta 9 gives.
Sure.
And if they found that, it's great. Like, but I see your point also with like the flavor of the month with cannabinoids, because I also saw that on the hemp industry side, right? You've got like people talking about CBN now and how it does wonders for sleep, and how there's CBG, the mother of all cannabinoids. So
Yep.
I think that will also continue to be a real kind of marketing play for a lot of these companies in the future, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a good thing, because uh, this is a tough industry. And so being able to bring new cannabinoids online, I think is beneficial to the public, in that it furthers what I think is the overall biggest benefit of cannabis, which is making us rethink our idea that one substance equals one treatment equals one use.
Right.
Cannabis is like, no, I'm going to treat everything.
That's where I
And
think people are going to be the most surprised. Once
yeah,
more education and more availability and accessibility of this plant comes, they're going to be like, wait, hold on. Because it's already happening with CBD. They're like, wait, this doesn't get me high, right? And it's going to just happen like, it's going to be the lock key effect with all these different cannabinoids. And then the mind's going to be blown when we start talking about material goods and like
yeah,
actual physical applications that we can make from this plant. You
yeah.
know, it's it's gonna be insane. I can't wait for that day. I don't know if I'll be alive to see it, but I hope I will.
Oh, you will. You will. I think the next 30 years in this industry is going to be very exciting.
Yeah.
And there are hundreds of cannabinoids out there, to be discovered and to be made into something useful potentially. And I'm interested to see how we take that application and start applying it to other plants and other substances, and really start questioning what have we been missing in what already exists.
Yeah, it seems like cannabis is part of this whole kind of human, I don't want to be cliche because this is like misinterpreted, not like reset, but way of thinking, right? And cannabis is part of that wave where, we're thinking about new types of currency, new types of ways of being healthy, and alternative medicine, cannabis falling under that category. It's truly an amazing time to be alive. While, there's bad, there's a lot of good also,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, not to sound cliche, but broaden your mind, man. Like everything. No, I really think
I'm with you.
cannabis is the opening to a much larger conversation about rethinking how we look at what we have access to and what we use and what our resources are. So
Mhm. I want to talk to you, of course, because you're a lawyer, and the NDAA, right? The Safe Banking Act was not included in the final bill.
right.
It's a setback for the industry, right? But the battle was lost. The war, we're winning the war, and
Yeah.
this is going to take time. So, where do we go from here? What do you see kind of playing out? We have 3 bills that have been proposed
Hmm.
from our elected officials in the federal government. So tell me, how do you think this all plays out?
So I would encourage, and I encourage my clients, don't keep looking to the federal government to fix the federal legalization issues. Um, there's a lot, like I said, there's a huge lack of education and understanding. There's some very long history of, of believing that cannabis is, evil, and that it has a huge stigma against it. And there are lots of legislators that no matter how much education you give them, they're never going to change their mind. So until those people are out of office, or the majority of them are out of office, and they're replaced with people who are willing to learn, it's going to still kind of go pretty slowly federally. Not to mention the CSA, the Controlled Substances Act, the thing that really is the umbrella under which we have to work all of these other regulations, specifically left a lot of regulation open to the states, because the federal government knew that they could never truly, with any efficiency, regulate drugs, controlled substances on a state and local level. So while they have they have controlling laws that apply across the United States, every single state creates and adopts its own CSA. And in a lot of ways, that CSA has been allowed in certain circumstances to override or overrule the federal CSA. So believe
in either
your
way,
safety.
like in either way of being more like lenient or like more strict.
Both.
Okay, yeah, it
Both.
could go both ways. Okay.
Yeah, that's the reason that you've seen, even though marijuana above 0.3% THC is illegal federally, that's why you've seen not a lot of fight in state courts from the federal government about when states want to bring it online as legal, because the CSA was actually designed to allow them to do that in a lot of circumstances. So they know that they don't have a leg to stand on. Plus, they don't have the resources to enforce it. So I would say don't get too caught up in all the bills that you see proposed. Right now, I mean, in any area of politics, it's super.
They're catalysts, though, right? I mean, like,
yeah, absolutely.
Because, like, absolutely. I mean, this has never happened before. So at least now we know that this issue is on the table. I wouldn't say it's like a top priority, of course, right? But it's on the table and there's eyeballs now. And what's also beneficial is that you have an engaged audience, right? You have the cannabis community worldwide, really, that's watching this, and they're relentless. So I think that those are like, those are good drivers, but I see your point, and it makes a lot of sense. There's no, like, it's going to happen at the state level, right? The state adoption is really going to drive this thing. But I'm wondering, like, where's the tipping point, right? Like, there's 18 states that are currently adult use. I feel like we have to get above half of the states in the country, right? So over 25 states, until the federal government's kind of feeling pressure, like, okay, we need to do this, because if we don't, then it's going to be crazy, right? Like, so is that like basically their hands going to be forced, is kind of what I think we're both saying.
I think so too. Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think the momentum is going to keep going. This has been a grassroots movement from the beginning, and it's going to continue to be that way. And that's a good thing. And it will tip to the point where the federal government has no choice. And I don't know that they're even going to do it grudgingly. They're just basically going to say, oh, well, cat's out of the bag, so here we go. Let's figure out how we can now benefit from this.
Yeah. I wonder if this is just, I always think this in the back of my mind. I kind of play out every scenario. And I wonder, with the Biden administration's like approval rating right now and everything that's happening, I wonder if like cannabis would be one of those like Hail Mary, like, hey, flip the switch, like, I'm going to fulfill my promises that I said on the election, on the campaign trail. That would be a wild card moment. And I don't know. I'm just, that would be crazy.
Well, I hope there's a political advisor sitting in the White House somewhere saying exactly what you're saying.
Because that would help him a lot. I mean, a lot of people would be, just the fact that he did that, they'd be like, okay, he filled his promise. And he let people out of jail, and okay, we're good. I'll vote for him. That would be enough for some people. I think.
I think so too. I think there are still the lack of understanding. I can't tell you how many people just in everyday life I talk to who they get cannabis as for medical purposes. They're all on board with it for medical purposes, but they're still having a real hard time with recreational cannabis. They haven't quite gotten there. They still got dare in the back of their mind.
It's just an excuse for you to get high. You just want to get high. Yeah. Exactly. And like you said earlier, when we first kicked off this podcast, it's a great alternative for anxiety and stress. Stress is the number one killer, right? I mean, and if you have the option of a cocktail or, cannabis consumption, some people want to choose cannabis. Not to say alcohol is bad, but it's less harmful,
Well, I think at this point, medically, it's proven that alcohol is in fact bad for you and has zero positives.
Right.
I think there's enough people that would say that, but I look at it as simple as, if we're going to go to the biology, your body has to work a lot harder to process alcohol because it's not meant to process it. Your body is actually designed to uptake cannabinoids. We have receptors for them. It can take it and create something with it that your body can use. So
that is such a great point. Because I'm learning that the hard way. Like I have, like with alcohol, especially as I'm getting older, right? And it's just it doesn't process the way it used to. And I'm learning that, and I've cut my intake back from alcohol because of that. And there's been nights where, I've consumed a lot of cannabis and I don't feel at all like terrible the next day, like
right.
I overdid it or anything.
Yep.
So that's a good way to put it. And you just reinforced kind of what I've been working on. So thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah.
If only now we just need to make sure everybody else knows that. And then
Well,
no longer will you have the conversation of, oh, they just want to get high.
right. I'm so tired of that. I know that's kind of like really the core of why I started this podcast. Real quick, I'll share this with you, and then I want to give you the floor to wrap up, Morgan. But I was so tired of just hearing the same old stuff, just like that. You just want to get high, or you're lazy, or people are bad when they smoke, or it's just not good. It's a gateway drug. All that shit. I was so tired of it, and because it's helped benefit my life, the past 16 years.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, no, I'm a living testament of this. What are you talking about? And I kind of saw that this industry is really burgeoning and starting to really mature. And now's the time, just to, like you said at the beginning, education is really, really needed. And, that's why I have experts like you on to talk about, your respective field, because you're closest to it. So really appreciate your insights, Morgan. You're super sharp. And I want to leave you the floor. What is there anything you want to leave the audience with before we wrap up?
Well, first, I just want to say, Kevin, thank you for having me on. And I think what you're doing is incredible, taking the time out of your life to do this as a passion project. This industry doesn't get anywhere without people like you right now who will invest their time and energy into it in the very beginning, and help deal with some of those stigmas that exist and help us unravel them. As far as me, I would say my love of this industry is the people in it and the plan itself and the possibilities and the potential. I love all the potential. And I want to make sure that my clients, the industry itself, anybody I can help, they can take advantage of that potential and not have to worry about so many of the legalities, or at least help them make it not so hard. So if I can be of help to anybody who feels like that's happening for them, I would love to help them.
Being a business owner is not easy, especially in the cannabis industry. There's so many different moving parts and hats you have to wear. So one less stress, taking the legality, concerns out of the way, and having Davis Legal step in to help with your legal needs and compliance needs. Morgan's the person to go to. Morgan, where can people find y'all's website and social media if they want to learn more?
Yeah, absolutely. So the website's morgandavislegal.com, and you can find me on Instagram at Morgan Davis Legal, LinkedIn, all the same, Facebook, Davis Legal PLLC, and I'm trying to think if I've got any other social media channels. I think that's it. Sometimes I lose track of them.
If we have any others, we'll be sure to drop them in the comments box in YouTube so people can find it. So
awesome.
Of course. Yes. Well, thank you so much again, Morgan. It's been a pleasure. I'd love to have you back on, in the next coming couple of months as things develop and we hear new policies or new announcements that come about. I'd love to have you on as kind of the legal correspondent.
Absolutely. Anytime. Give me a call. Happy to.
Awesome. Sounds good. I will. And thank you all for listening. Bye.